Hello, my name is Sofiya Kartalova. Welcome to my talk, The Gordian Knot Between Originator Control and EU Intelligence Oversight, Insights from Competition Theory. Accountability for governmental actions is an essential ingredient of a liberal democracy. At the EU level, horizontal intelligence oversight is generally thought to be the domain of the European Parliament, the Court of Justice of the European Union, and the European Ombudsman. Out of these, the European Parliament is the most well-equipped institution to handle issues of transparency, control, and oversight, thanks to its strong democratic legitimacy. Nevertheless, parliamentary oversight has been particularly problematic in the EU. This has led to the damning assessment, and I quote, that EU intelligence agencies are subject to weaker accountability provisions than their national counterparts. In fact, EU intelligence agencies are not accountable at all, end quote. With the entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty in the year 2009, parliamentary oversight of Europol has undergone two major changes. The European Parliament and the Council are to jointly adopt regulations as part of the ordinary legislative procedure under Article 8, paragraph 2A of the TFEU. And the European Parliament is to collaborate with the national parliaments of the EU member states to exercise scrutiny over Europol's activities. Under Article 88, paragraph 2 of the TFEU, the last sentence. Based on the latter provision, the Joint Parliamentary Scrutiny Group, or the JPSG, on Europol was established for the purposes of which the European Parliament is granted privileged access to classified information for the first time in its history. Despite these reforms, EU parliamentary oversight of intelligence activities continues to meet its greatest challenge in the originator control principle, ORCON, both of these tangled up in an irresolvable Gordian knot. The following interdisciplinary paper uses insights from competition theory in the area of organizational and management studies to shed light onto the suitability of the existing legal solutions for this problem. Let us begin the analysis by briefly exploring the meaning and application of the ORCON principle with regards to sharing or declassifying intelligence information in the EU. The principle of originator control, which demands that, and I quote, any further distribution of intelligence or its inclusion in another document must be approved by the originating agency, end quote, is also commonly referred to as third-party rule. In the legal framework of the European Union Classified Information, EUCI, the principle of originator control confirms upon the originator of secrets the exclusive discretion to decide if and how their secrets are to be distributed and shared. Today, the ORCON rule expressly places the burden of responsibility on the requesting party to obtain written approval from the originator, whose consent is being considered almost absolute. This type of hard ORCON rule was enshrined in the 2001 Council decision on classified information, as well as in Article 9 of the Regulation 1049/01. Thus, the ORCON principle is entrenched in a wide spectrum of legal instruments for the Council, the Commission, other EU bodies and agencies, and oversight institutions. Despite its fundamental significance for protecting the highly sensitive sources and methods used for acquiring intelligence information, however, ORCON is considered a major impediment to intelligence sharing in practice, which also holds true for EU intelligence sharing. The function of an ORCON principle is to remedy distrust between the senders and receivers engaged in intelligence sharing by reducing the risk of defection. The fear of defection, which effectively leads to the violation of the established cooperation between the parties, is the greatest inhibitor to intelligence sharing. In this sense, defection denotes passing passing shared intelligence to unauthorized third parties or sending inaccurate, incomplete, or fabricated intelligence to others. And that is a quote by Walsh. Clearly, the Orcon rule prohibits defection of the first type, the transfer of intelligence to a third party without the prior consent of the originator. At first glance, it might seem that the Orcon requirement is easy to satisfy. One need only ask for the originator's permission to share the information with third party. However, that permission may be denied without any further justification or any means of appeal. Further intelligence services are highly likely to abstain from approaching the originator for permission, since even this simple act may be taken as a sign that there are grounds for concern and that the trusting relationship needs to be reassessed, both in terms of past and future exchanges. Furthermore, the cost of defection is high, since the secret sources and methods of collective intelligence by the center or their allies could be revealed to unauthorized third parties, leading to unforeseeable and possibly catastrophic consequences. Within a security context, the Orcon rule is considered by EU officials and other stakeholders dealing with official secrets as indispensable. For the EU, originator control is a powerful means of gaining the trust of other security actors, such as member states and third parties, as well as of establishing itself as a security actor with serious reputation. In this sense, the effective implementation of the Orcon rule is an essential prerequisite for member states to trust the EU agencies, that is, in this case, Europol, enough to make the voluntary decision to share intelligence with them. However, at present, the degree of trust between the member states and Europol has still not reached a high level. Due to derivative classification, the rigid application of the Orcon principle has far-reaching ramifications which obstruct intelligence sharing in the EU. Intelligence sharing takes place when one state, that is the sender, communicates intelligence in its possession to another state, that is the receiver, a definition by James Walsh. Intelligence sharing is an indispensable element of combating security threats of cross-border nature. At the EU level, intelligence cooperation is the domain of Europol and INCEN, which aspire to lead the fight against terrorism. Nevertheless, it is no secret that the European Union struggles to define the parameters of its role and prove its mettle in the area of intelligence sharing. For governmental decision makers at national and supranational level, intelligence sharing is a particularly valuable channel for the acquisition of intelligence, since such information would be otherwise unobtainable at acceptable cost. Despite these clear benefits, the national intelligence services of the EU member states seem reluctant to share intelligence with the EU intelligence agencies, and the EU has so far been hesitant to fully commit to harnessing this potential. Since the EU is not and was never intended to be an international organization with competence in the area of national security under Article 4, paragraph 2 of the TEU, it lacks the legal instruments in its toolbox to deal with issues of this nature. This leaves the EU member states practically unencumbered by any obligation to share intelligence at EU level. As a result, the quality and quantity of intelligence information transmitted from the member states to key EU agencies has been unsatisfactory. Despite some improvement in recent years, the situation with Europol still leaves a lot to be desired. In practice, the added value brought by the existing EU institutions with intelligence capabilities could also be called into question. For example, Aldrich Burres emphasizes the EU's inability to produce intelligence itself and its dependence on the member states for intelligence gathering. As a result, national security services and intelligence agencies lack the incentive to feed the designated EU agency intelligence. This is what Burres referred to as the chicken-egg dilemma. For all of these reasons, the information exchange structure at Europol provides fertile ground for the study of the effects of the Orcon principle on intelligence sharing and oversight in the EU. Now let's move on to proposals for untying the Gordian knot between originator control and EU intelligence oversight. There are two main ways in which the Orcon principle inhibits EU parliamentary oversight. Firstly, even though the Europol director has privileged access to information and is required to appear before the JPSG to answer questions, they may choose or may be compelled not to reveal confidential information. Secondly, the Orcon principle renders sensitive information used in finance or strategic analysis reports, threat assessments, and general situation reports inaccessible to the JPSG, reserving the classified version only for the executive community of intelligence and security actors. Neither of these mechanisms, whether applied individually or in combination with each other, argues Vigilancia Bassi, is capable of filling in the gaps in information access that undermine the effective implementation of EU intelligence oversight. There are currently two contrasting approaches to untying the Gordian knot between the Orcon principle and EU parliamentary oversight. For the purposes of enhancing international intelligence cooperation, Born and others recommend that the Orcon rule be amended to include an exception for parliamentary oversight. Born and others argue that the uncompromising application of the Orcon rule on oversight bodies effectively gives one state the opportunity to veto oversight in another state. Furthermore, the national intelligence services can only be scrutinized subject to permission, which makes the system vulnerable to abuse. This model allows a foreign partner to manipulate these limitations in order to shield from scrutiny information sharing with respect to a particular person, subject matter, activities, or files. Raphael Bossong also suggests that national intelligence services simply adopt less restrictive interpretations of the Orcon rule to allow EU oversight access to classified intelligence information. In response to the problematic interaction between the Orcon principle and EU parliamentary oversight, Vigilenka Bassi puts forward two important proposals for generating trust as well as promoting predictability and consistency between the secret keepers in this relationship. Firstly, Abbasi draws attention to the necessity for taking measures to ensure the European Parliament offers a standard of protection of classified information that is sufficient and equivalent to that of the Council. Secondly, Abbasi focuses on ex post review, a mechanism in which the JPSG would be granted access to sensitive information after the relevant operations or activities of Europol have already taken place. That could be a neat way of untying the Gordian knot between originator control and EU intelligence oversight. Now let us continue with insights from competition theory. Clearly, the proposals for untying the Gordian knot between the Orcon principle and EU intelligence oversight have led to little progress in practice thus far, in the light of the most recent round of Europol reforms in 2021. Perhaps the time has come then to reevaluate our approach to regulation in this area. This paper argues that the common assumption that intelligence sharing at EU level is solely a matter of cooperation is erroneous. Instead of cooperation, a more fitting paradigm to serve as a starting point for theorizing the relationships among the national intelligence services of the EU member states, as well as between EU intelligence agencies, between them and EU intelligence agencies, would be co-opetition. Co-opetition is a term borrowed from organizational and business studies, which broadly means that the actors are engaged in both cooperation and competition with each other. The main motivator behind the decision to engage in a coopetitive relationship is joint value creation. To put it simply, competition means cooperating to create a bigger business pie while competing to divide it up, which is a famous quote, which I found in Ritala and Hormelina Laukkanen's article citing Brandenburger and Nailbuff. Thus, the basic assumption behind competition is that competition allows firms to create more value together, and thus there will be more for each actor to appropriate later on. Entering a competitive relationship yields a range of benefits as a result of joint value creation, such as access to the knowledge and resources of your partner that are otherwise unobtainable. This is a less costly and overall more efficient way of tackling business challenges, which could also lead to breakthroughs in innovation. At the same time, however, the competitive relationship poses a number of risks associated with value appropriation, namely opportunism and knowledge leaks. Knowledge has been perceived as a competitive advantage and a source of power for those who possess it at the right place and the right time, end quote. Therefore, the cooperation competition tension in competition could also be reframed in terms of knowledge management in pursuit of innovation, respectively knowledge sharing and knowledge protection. These findings are applicable to both dyadic and multi-partner competition settings and could be found on inter-organizational and intra-organizational level. The applicability of insights from competition theory to EU intelligence sharing is plain to see if one is willing to consider the possibility that the cooperation model may be flawed. Sofiya Hoffman finds fault with the cooperation model since it is based on an unproven assumption that intelligence agencies and actors with a highly national perspective on security and international affairs who consider foreign intelligence agencies as enemies rather than collegial institutions, end quote. This erroneous assumption lies at the root of the national intelligence agencies' unwillingness to share information. Hoffman suggests that knowledge circulation and the control of intelligence agencies as transnationally constituted knowledge providers offers a better analytical framework to understand transnational intelligence sharing. This is a deviation from the established mode of thinking that is compatible with the insights from competition theory. The customary use of the term cooperation to describe intelligence sharing at EU level overlooks competitive tensions between actors. This fosters an assumption that the cooperative mindset of the partners in intelligence sharing is the default position, which misrepresents competition as an unacceptable departure from this baseline, rather than its natural extension. In fact, cooperation and competition coexist with each other. A dyad that defines the dynamics of competitive intelligence sharing. If applied to interstate relationships, the notion of cooperation is misleading in that it suggests that there is a permanent and full congruence between the political interests of the member states, which is established from the outset with the decision to cooperate and remains unchanged throughout the entire lifespan of the relationship. This must instead be labeled as competition, since, and I quote, the same countries can be allies in some issues and rivals in others, end quote. Even if the member states focus on cooperation in a non-contentious area, such as counterterrorism, it is highly probable that they would be hesitant to fully commit to cooperation. Logically, this would entail revealing some of their sources and methods, which otherwise give them a competitive advantage over other member states in more contentious areas. Competition also defines intelligence sharing in relationships at interorganizational level, nationally and supranationally. National intelligence services of EU member states may be reluctant to share information with rival intelligence agencies within their own country. They may be equally unwilling to exchange information with Europol, since this EU agency may be perceived as a competitor to the national police force. Competition is thus realized on both interstate and inter-organizational level in EU intelligence sharing. Now let us examine a way to cut through the Gordian knot between originator control and EU intelligence oversight. What is missing from the current state of knowledge is a comprehensive model that indicates the prioritization of considerations that inform a national intelligence agency's decision to share information with its partners in the competitive relationship from other member states. This is where insights from Lobecke's and others' game theoretic study on knowledge transfer in competition comes into play. Lobecke and others' investigation reveals that there are three dimensions to interorganizational knowledge sharing. That is synergy, leverageability, and negative reverse impact. Importantly, negative reverse impact refers to, and I quote, the extent to which a receiver's use of knowledge acquired during cooperation may lower the sender's original value of the knowledge, end quote. Lobeck and others established that only the risk of high negative reverse impact is capable of changing the firm's decision to share information, initially based on the comparisons between level of synergy and leverageability, for the worse in every case. Based on these findings, if one were to take measures to enhance information sharing between the partners in the competitive relationship, one needs to be primarily concerned with managing against the risk of negative reverse impact. At first glance, it seems that this is precisely what the OR-CON rule is designed to do: reduce the risk of negative reverse impact. After all, who other than the originator is better positioned to be able to tell if the misuse of classified intelligence information might backfire on their sources? If that is the case, the OR-CON principle must remain absolute, and the EU institutions will have to adjust to this reality. However, there are two arguments against this position. Firstly, if a basis proposal for ex post review is implemented, then the original value of the information will remain unaffected by EU parliamentary oversight, while the relevant intelligence activities unfold in secrecy. This is how the risk of negative reverse impact is greatly reduced. The implication of this finding is that the OR-CON rule and negative reverse impact are not completely aligned. Therefore, a reduction in the scope of the OR-CON principle with respect to the timing of disclosure of information for the sake of oversight is possible without triggering negative reverse impact. Secondly, competition theory refutes the claim that the originator is best positioned to manage the risk of negative reverse impact through their OR-CON consent. The involvement of a third party as a knowledge broker is an indispensable addition in coupled innovation projects among multiple competitors. That is for Rohr and Fernandez. The introduction of this role constitutes good practice in competition management and is described as follows, and I quote, "The knowledge flows are thus formally centralized by the third party, which guaranteed the protection of the shared knowledge and mitigated knowledge transfers from one competitor to another," end quote. This is why effective intelligence sharing exercised at the EU level, necessarily accompanied by EU parliamentary oversight, is indispensable. For this reason, the parliamentary collaboration within the JPSG for the purposes of EU enhancing intelligence sharing and oversight becomes a must. This effort will be more effective if the proposals by Born and others in Bosong are set into motion Since national parliament representatives at the JPSG will benefit from improved access to information and will be more effective in their mission. Co-petition theory offers additional insights as to how this might be achieved in practice. Managing tensions associated with information in co-petition is crucial, especially for co-petition projects, since, and I quote, information that is shared within a common collaborative project potentially could be used in a different market in which the partners compete. To this end, the associated problems with derivative classification and overclassification at EU level described by Abbasi must be resolved. To conclude, severing the ties with the inaccurate and unhelpful notion of intelligence cooperation is the key to ensuring effective EU parliamentary oversight cut loose from the entanglement with the ORCON principle. A more accurate and realistic understanding of the dynamic between the actors based on co-petition creates a conceptual and analytical framework within which a natural demand for management of intelligence sharing and its requisite oversight emerges in the EU. The prudent choice of regulation mechanisms is simply a follow-up response to this adjustment in perception. Thank you very much for your attention. This is the end of the presentation.